In the heart of a valley where mountains leaned close to listen and rivers curled like silver ribbons through emerald fields, there lived a girl named Chessa. She was unlike any other child in the village. While the other children chased fireflies, climbed fruit trees, and helped their parents in the fields, Chessa would sit by the window of her small wooden cottage with her loom, a curious loom of pale wood and crystal beams that shimmered faintly even in daylight. This loom had not been crafted by human hands. It had belonged to her mother, who had passed it on to Chessa before she faded into the stars. The villagers whispered that Chessa's mother had once been a dreamweaver from the sky realm, a being touched by the constellations themselves. Whatever the truth, the loom accepted no one's hands but Chessa's, and when she worked it, threads of starlight spilled forth as if the night sky had been spun into strands. Chessa wove by moonlight. Each evening, as the first stars rose above the darkening valley, she would sit at her loom. Her silver hair gleamed in the glow, her fingers dancing across the threads with a patience far beyond her years. The fabric she produced shimmered like living sky, deep indigo woven with glowing threads of light. But these were no ordinary cloths. Each held whispers of something more. One evening, when a farmer named Oren came to her with tired eyes and shoulders heavy from the weight of poor harvests, she gave him a scarf woven of soft midnight and speckled with tiny sparks of silver. When he wrapped it around his neck, the farmer swore that he felt courage warm in his chest, steadying his heart for another season of toil. Another time, a grieving widow received a shawl that glimmered like dawn. When she wore it, her tears did not vanish, but she found comfort in the strength to walk forward, to plant new seeds in her garden, and to smile once more at the laughter of children. Chessa's star-woven cloths traveled quietly from home to home, giving people small sparks of hope when they needed it most. To strangers passing through the valley, her weavings seemed miraculous. To the villagers who knew her, they were a reminder that light always remained, even in the darkest of nights. Yet Chessa herself often felt like an outsider. The villagers respected her gift, but she noticed how children sometimes stared at her glowing silver hair or how mothers hushed their little ones when they asked why Chessa's loom sang at night. She did not mind. The loom was her friend, her companion, and her purpose. And so, even when loneliness pressed at her, she continued weaving night after night. But then, something strange began to happen. One clear evening, as Chessa raised her eyes to the heavens for her threads, she noticed that a patch of sky above the valley looked strangely dim. The stars that usually twinkled there seemed absent, as though someone had plucked them away. At first, she thought it must be a trick of clouds, but the air was clear, the horizon sharp. A shadowy emptiness spread like spilled ink. Her loom shivered beneath her hands. Threads snapped. The shining strands of starlight that she always drew from the sky grew thinner, weaker, until they looked like faint wisps instead of steady beams. Chessa's heart quickened. Never had the loom faltered. Never had the stars failed her. The next night, the emptiness had grown. A whole constellation had disappeared. The weaver's crown, 7 bright stars that guided travelers through the mountains, was missing. The villagers noticed too. Shepherds whispered of getting lost in pastures. A hunter returned shaken, claiming that the night sky seemed to turn him in circles. Children wept because their favorite stories, told about the constellations, suddenly made no sense without their stars. And still, Chessa's loom weakened. She sat at the loom, her fingers trembling, weaving as best she could. The fabric came out patchy and thin. When she gave it to a crying child, it glowed faintly but did not soothe her fears as it once had. That night, Chessa stayed awake until dawn, staring at the dark patch of sky. For the first time in her life, she wondered if her gift was not enough. She had been called the girl who wove the night, but what if the night itself was unraveling? The elders of the village gathered, speaking in hushed voices beneath the old oak tree in the square. Chessa crept close enough to hear them whisper of omens, of ancient prophecies, of the unweaver, a being of shadow who, they said, long ago tried to cut apart the threads of the heavens. Chessa's chest tightened. She returned to her cottage, sat at her loom, and laid her hands gently on the trembling wood. "I will not let the night be stolen," she whispered to it. Her voice was quiet, but steady. The loom gave a faint hum in reply, as if it had been waiting for her vow. And though fear knotted her stomach, Chessa knew then that the story of her weaving was only just beginning. The days that followed were uneasy in the valley. Though the sun still rose golden in the mornings and the river still sang its clear tune through the fields, people moved with a heaviness in their steps. When dusk fell and night stretched its velvet cloak across the mountains, villagers could not help but look up with dread. What had once been a sky full of familiar constellations, guides for shepherds, companions for dreamers, guardians for children, now bore scars of darkness. The missing stars were no longer a patch but a spreading wound. Whole clusters dimmed as if their light were being devoured. For Chessa, each night was a trial. Her loom, once vibrant and alive with threads that flowed like liquid silver, now resisted her touch. When she placed her fingers upon it, the strands trembled, faint and weak. The threads no longer sang as they passed through her hands. Instead, they shivered with a sound like tearing cloth. She wove anyway. Her hands moved with practiced grace, trying to coax the threads into strength. But the fabric that emerged was brittle, fragile. She gave a small cloth to a shepherd who feared losing his flock in the mountain passes. The cloth glowed faintly for a while, but by morning its light had faded, leaving him with nothing but threadbare fabric. The disappointment in his eyes pierced her heart. That night, unable to sleep, Chessa climbed the hill above her cottage, where the air was clear and the horizon stretched wide. She gazed upward, and saw it. Not just emptiness. Not just stars gone dim. A seam. It cut across the heavens like a jagged scar, black and endless, running straight through the constellation of the hunter's bow. The seam pulsed faintly, as if some vast scissors had sliced through the fabric of the night. Around its edges, stars flickered and winked out, tugged inward as though being unraveled. Chessa's breath caught. She stumbled backward, clutching the satchel at her side. Her heart pounded. "The sky is tearing," she whispered. Her mind swirled with memories of the elders, whispers, the unweaver, the destroyer of threads, the enemy of light. But those were old tales, stories told by firelight. Could they be true? She raced back to her cottage and sat at the loom, desperate to test her fear. With trembling hands, she drew her threads. This time they came, but only as thin strands, fraying at the edges. The loom groaned beneath her fingers. And then, the sound. A faint rrrip echoed in the air, though no fabric tore in her hands. It came from above, from the heavens. She froze. Her heart thudded like a drum. The sound came again, louder. The sky itself was unraveling. For a moment, she sat frozen, her hands still upon the loom. Then her resolve hardened. She could not sit idle. She must warn the elders. At dawn, Chessa carried her worn, frayed fabric to the oak tree in the village square, where the council of elders gathered. Farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen crowded around, their faces lined with worry. Chessa lifted the cloth high. "The sky is tearing," she declared, her voice steadier than she felt. "The threads grow weak. Last night I heard it, the sound of the heavens unraveling." The crowd gasped. Mothers pulled their children close. A fisherman muttered prayers under his breath. Elder Marin, the oldest among them, stepped forward. His beard was white as frost, his eyes clouded but still sharp with wisdom. He studied the cloth in her hands, running gnarled fingers over its fraying threads. "It is as the stories warned," he said at last, his voice grave. "The unweaver stirs." A silence fell. Long ago, Marin explained, the sky realm itself had been crafted on a great loom by the first weavers, beings of light who spun stars from threads of song and breath. But one among them grew jealous of creation's beauty. This spirit, dark and envious, sought to undo what the others had made. With shears of silence, it cut at the sky, unraveling constellations. The weavers fought and sealed it away beyond the stars, but the stories warned that one day it would return. And now, Marin finished, his eyes heavy with sorrow, "The tearing has begun." Fear rippled through the crowd. What would happen if the sky unraveled completely? Would day and night vanish? Would the world itself dissolve? Chessa clutched the frayed cloth to her chest. "What can we do?" she asked. "How can it be stopped?" Marin's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Child, you carry a gift unlike any other. You weave the night itself. If anyone can mend the heavens, it is you." Her throat tightened. "Me?" But, I am only Chessa. My threads are weakening, my loom falters. How could I stand against something as vast as the Unweaver? Before Marin could answer, a sudden shadow swept over the square. The villagers gasped and looked skyward. From the horizon, clouds rolled in, not the gentle gray of rain, but towering, black masses shot through with lightning. They spiraled and twisted until they formed a colossal shape. A great heron, its wings stretching across the heavens, its eyes glowing with stormlight. The villagers cried out and scattered, some falling to their knees in awe. The heron descended slowly, landing in the square with a crash of thunder. Wind whipped through the valley, scattering dust and leaves. Chessa stood frozen as the storm-heron lowered its head, its beak gleaming like silver lightning. Its voice rolled like distant thunder. Chessa, it rumbled, the sky realm calls. The celestial loom lies broken. The Unweaver cuts the threads. You are chosen to mend what was torn. The villagers gasped, murmuring her name like a prayer. Chessa's knees trembled. The sky loomed dark above, the seam stretching wider with every heartbeat. She clutched her satchel close, hearing the whispers of her woven charms within. She did not feel chosen. She felt small, fragile, a single thread against the void. But as the storm-heron's gaze held hers, she felt something stir within, a spark, faint but steady. The same spark she had once given to others through her cloth. Hope. She swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and whispered, "Then I will go." The storm-heron stood tall in the village square, its wings stretching wider than any tree, feathers rippling like shifting thunderheads. Lightning flickered faintly along its body, not in violence but as though it carried the living pulse of a storm within itself. Its eyes glowed a fierce white, yet when they met Chessa's gaze, she felt no threat. Instead, she sensed patience, as though the creature had been waiting for her arrival all along. The villagers huddled in clusters around the square, their fear mingled with awe. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. Farmers clutched their hats, kneeling against the whipping wind. Even Elder Marin bowed his head in reverence, whispering words of recognition. Chessa, the heron rumbled, its voice deeper than rolling thunder, "You have touched the threads of the night as few mortals ever could. The stars answer to your loom. The celestial realm watches. And now, it calls." Chessa swallowed hard, her hands trembling at her sides. She looked up at the widening seam in the sky, its black edge creeping further across the constellations, and felt both terrified and small. "You say I am chosen," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the rushing wind. "But why me? My weaving falters. The threads grow weak in my hands. I am not enough to mend what has been torn." The heron lowered its great head until its glowing eye filled her vision. For a moment, she saw not storm and shadow but fragments of stars reflected in its gaze, distant galaxies and rivers of light flowing across endless skies. "No thread stands alone," the heron said. "It is strength together that weaves the sky. Your gift is not in the cloth you make, but in the hope you awaken in others. That hope is the only power the Unweaver cannot cut." Chessa's breath hitched. She thought of the villagers, of Warren, who had worn her scarf to face his fields, of the widow who found comfort in her shawl, of the children who clutched glowing scraps of fabric on nights they were afraid. Small gestures, small sparks. Could such sparks truly stand against the darkness unraveling the heavens? Before she could ask more, the heron spread its wings, and the square filled with wind and rushing cloud. Its feathers dissolved into swirling mist, yet still held shape, as though it was both storm and creature at once. "I am Oral," it declared, "messenger of the sky realm. The celestial loom lies within the Tower of Winds, far beyond the mountains and seas. There the Unweaver cuts freely, spreading its silence. You must travel with me to the tower. Only with your weaving can the threads be bound anew." The villagers gasped. A shepherd cried out, "She cannot go alone. She is but a child." But Elder Marin raised his hand for silence. His eyes, clouded though they were, held steady on Chessa. "She will not go alone. She will carry us all in her threads." Chessa felt the weight of his words. Her satchel, where the villagers had placed charms of glowing fabric the night before, seemed heavier now, not with burden, but with purpose. Still, her heart fluttered. To leave her valley, her cottage, her familiar hills, to journey into skies where mortals had never walked, was a thought so vast it left her dizzy. Yet the seam in the heavens widened even as she stood there. Delay would mean the loss of more stars. She clenched her hands into fists. I will go. The villagers' murmur rose like a tide. Some wept quietly, others pressed forward, offering small tokens, a carved wooden charm, a sprig of lavender, a ribbon dyed with river water, simple gifts to remind her of home. Chessa tucked them gently into her satchel, her chest aching with both fear and fierce love. Oral the heron bent low, one wing sweeping to the ground like a bridge of mist. Climb upon my back, it said. Chessa hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping forward. She grasped the soft yet electric feeling feathers and pulled herself onto the heron's back. The moment she settled, she felt the world shift beneath her, as though the air itself accepted her weight, as though the sky welcomed her. The villagers lifted their faces. Go with courage, Chessa. One called. Bring back our stars, cried another. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. She raised a hand in farewell, and then Oral spread its wings. With a thunderous beat, the storm-heron launched into the sky. Wind roared through the square, scattering dust and petals. Villagers shielded their eyes, staring upward as Chessa and the heron climbed higher, higher, until they became no more than a silver glimmer against the dark wound of the heavens. The valley shrank beneath them. Rivers glistened like ribbons of light. Forests spread in rolling seas of green. The mountains, once looming, now bowed small beneath the sky's vast expanse. And above, the seam stretched wider, swallowing more constellations. Chessa clutched the heron's feathers tightly, her heart pounding, her satchel pressed against her side. She was leaving everything she had ever known, riding into a sky unraveling before her eyes. Yet in her chest, the spark of hope flickered stronger. For though she was only a girl with a loom, she was also the girl who wove the night, and now, she must weave the sky itself. The valley had always been Chessa's world. She knew every curve of the river, every moss-covered stone along the paths, every bend of wind that whistled through the mountains. When she walked through the village, the scent of bread baking in clay ovens or wild thyme crushed beneath children's feet felt as much a part of her life as the silver threads that passed through her fingers each night. And now she was leaving it all behind. When dawn broke the morning after the storm-heron's arrival, the village stirred with an energy unlike any before. Farmers did not go to their fields. Shepherds left their flocks untended at the meadow's edge. Fishermen drew in their nets early. Instead, all gathered in the square to see Chessa off. Oral, the storm-heron, stood waiting at the far end of the square, its wings folded like heavy curtains of thunderclouds. Its eyes glowed with patience, though occasionally lightning flickered faintly across its feathers. The very air around it thrummed, carrying the scent of rain. Chessa stood at the doorway of her cottage, satchel slung across her shoulder. Inside the satchel were the charms the villagers had given her the night before, glowing scraps of her own woven cloth, ribbons of hope that pulsed faintly with light. She touched them through the fabric as if to remind herself they were real. Her loom stood silent in the corner of the cottage, its crystal beams catching the morning sun. For a moment, she hesitated, her heart heavy. Would she ever sit at it again? Would her cottage wait for her return, or would the valley itself change in her absence? Her fingers brushed the loom one last time. It hummed faintly, like a lullaby. Chessa smiled through the tightness in her chest. I'll come back, she whispered. And when I do, we'll weave the sky together again. Then she stepped outside. The square erupted into murmurs. Villagers pressed forward to see her, some reaching out to touch her hands as she passed. Their faces bore mixtures of fear and pride, sorrow and fierce determination. Elder Marin approached first. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his old eyes shining with a light that no shadow could dim. You are the valley's thread, Chessa, he said. Where you go, we are woven too. Remember this when you face the dark. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Then came the gifts. One by one, the villagers offered her tokens to carry with her. A baker's wife gave her a loaf wrapped in cloth embroidered with stars. A young shepherd pressed a whistle carved from bone into her hand. A grandmother with trembling fingers tied a string of dried herbs around her wrist. Children gave her pebbles, ribbons, and even a small jar filled with fireflies that glowed faintly in the morning light. Chessa accepted each gift with bowed head, her satchel growing heavy with the weight of their love. Finally, Oren the farmer stepped forward. His eyes were tired, but his voice rang steady. He held out a scarf, one of her earliest weavings, worn and frayed, yet still faintly glowing. "This was mine," he said softly. "It gave me strength when I thought the earth would never yield again. Now it belongs to you. May it remind you that even weak soil can bloom with enough care." Tears stung Chessa's eyes as she accepted it, folding it carefully into her satchel. The widow who once wore her dawn-colored shawl came next. She cupped Chessa's face in her hands. "You gave me light when I thought none remained. Remember, child, even the smallest spark can drive away a vast darkness." Chessa nodded, her voice lost but her heart swelling. The children, who had always peeked shyly at her silver hair, now rushed forward boldly. They clung to her skirt, tugging and laughing through tears. "Bring back the stars, Chessa," they cried. "Make the sky shine again." Chessa knelt among them, pressing her hands gently to their heads. "I promise," she said, her voice trembling yet firm. "I will mend the sky for you." When at last she stood, the square was quiet. Every villager's eyes were on her. Even the air seemed to wait. Oral lowered its wing like a bridge of cloud once more. "It is time," the heron rumbled. Chessa turned back to the crowd. She wanted to say something, words to hold them close, to promise her return, to ease their fears. But her throat ached, and all she managed was a soft, "Thank you. I will carry you all in my threads." Perhaps that was enough. She climbed onto Oral's back. The gifts in her satchel pressed against her side like beating hearts. As the heron rose, wings spreading, the villagers lifted their hands, waving, calling her name. Some cried openly, others shouted blessings. Their voices carried upward, woven together like one great thread of sound. Chessa looked down as the valley grew small. The roofs of cottages gleamed in morning light. The river sparkled, winding its way through fields that shimmered with dew. Smoke rose gently from chimneys. She breathed it all in, holding the sight deep within her as though to weave it into memory itself. Her home, her heart. She raised a hand high in farewell. The wind carried her tears away as Oral beat its wings and soared higher, beyond the valley's rim, toward the unraveling sky. Chessa pressed her hand to her satchel. She no longer felt like a lonely girl with silver hair and a strange gift. She felt like a thread pulled into a vast tapestry, one that stretched beyond mountains and seas, beyond even the stars. The valley had given her its hope. Now she must carry it into the heavens. And for the first time, though fear still pressed against her ribs, courage sang louder. The morning sun rose timidly, spilling pale gold over the jagged peaks of the distant mountains. The valley behind them now lay silent, fading into memory, and Chessa stood at the edge of a winding path, her storm loom carefully strapped to her back. The air was thin here, sharp and cool, and each breath carried the faint metallic tang of approaching storms. Ahead towered the mountain of the silent thunder, a colossal formation of stone so immense it seemed to pierce the clouds. But what unsettled Chessa most was not its size, it was the strange silence. Despite the constant flashes of lightning that danced within the misty heights, there was no accompanying roar of thunder. The mountain swallowed sound itself, holding its storms in an eternal hush. Kalen, the storm-heron, circled above her, wings slicing through the chill air. "You hesitate," his voice echoed in her thoughts, for he communicated not with words but with a presence that brushed her mind. Chessa clenched her hands and whispered, I just, it feels wrong here. Like the sky itself is holding its breath." Kalen glided lower, his silver feathers scattering tiny sparks of light. "It is wrong. The silent thunder has been bound. The storms are trapped, stolen from the skies. And unless you free them, Chessa, the loom will not sing true." The thought struck deep, filling her with unease. Every step on this journey had brought her closer to understanding her gift, but also closer to truths too vast to bear. If someone had bound an entire mountain's storm, then whoever controlled that power could shatter the heavens themselves. The ascent begins. The path grew steeper and narrower as Chessa climbed, boots scraping against loose shale. Dark clouds gathered thickly above, yet no sound followed the brilliant flashes of lightning. At times, she swore she could feel the very earth trembling faintly beneath her feet, as though the mountain itself wanted to speak but could not. Halfway up, the air became heavy with static, and the faint shimmer of her storm loom pulsed softly beneath its wrappings. The threads within it tugged faintly, resonating with an unseen force. "Something's calling to it," she murmured, pausing to press her palm against the wood of the loom. It was warm, alive almost, as though aware of its surroundings. Then came the first sign of danger. A low rumble, not of thunder but of stone shifting, rippled beneath her boots. From the mist ahead, shapes began to emerge, tall, skeletal figures formed of cracked basalt and pale lightning veins running through their bodies. Their hollow eyes glimmered faintly, and their movements were unnervingly silent. Kaelin swooped low, shrieking, "Stormbound! The mountain's guardians!" Chessa stumbled back, heart hammering. "I'm not here to hurt this place," she called softly, gripping the loom. "I want to set you free." The guardians halted, their lightning-veined forms pulsing faintly. But when she stepped forward again, they advanced, slow and relentless. The chamber of silent storms. At last, Chessa reached the mountain's summit, a jagged plateau where a massive stone arch opened into a cavern. The air here was charged, so thick with energy it raised the hairs along her arms. Inside, the cavern pulsed with eerie light. Dozens of storms were suspended mid-birth. Frozen spheres of crackling lightning and swirling clouds trapped in crystal orbs hung from the cavern's ceiling like imprisoned hearts. Beneath them stood a single figure cloaked in slate-gray robes, their back to Chessa. In one hand, they held a long silver rod inscribed with runes, the source of the bindings. "You shouldn't be here," the voice was low, almost sorrowful, and it reverberated through the cavern like distant echoes. "This place belongs to silence." Chessa stepped forward cautiously. "I weave the storms," she said, lifting the loom from her back. "I felt their pain. You've trapped them." The figure turned slightly, revealing a pale, mask-like face marked with cracks of faint blue light. "Trapped? No, saved. The world below doesn't understand the power of the storms. They tear, they break, they devour. I keep them here so they can harm no one." "But you're suffocating the sky," Chessa said softly. "Without the storms, the balance will fail. The earth will wither. The constellations will scatter. I can hear them crying." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the faint hum of contained lightning. The storm unbound. The figure sighed, lowering the silver rod. "If you seek to release them, Weaver, then you must do so by the old way." Through the song of the loom. Chessa hesitated, but Kaelin landed beside her, pressing his beak gently against her shoulder. "You can do this," his presence whispered. She knelt before the storm loom, placing her hands upon its glowing threads. As her fingers moved, the loom began to sing, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to awaken the cavern walls. Threads of light spilled outward, weaving through the air like living veins, touching each trapped storm one by one. The crystal orbs began to fracture, releasing brilliant spheres of lightning that spiraled upward, screaming silently into the void. Thunder rippled without sound, and for a moment the entire mountain trembled, as if sighing in relief after centuries of holding its breath. The robed figure watched, unmoving, their cracked mask glowing brighter. "The storms, they remember you," they murmured softly. "Perhaps I was wrong." When the last orb shattered, the silence finally broke. A single, earth-shaking peal of thunder roared across the heavens, loud and triumphant. The mountain was free. A warning on the wind. But freedom came at a cost. As the final lightning arced across the sky, Chessa saw faint symbols blaze upon the horizon, ancient constellations rearranging themselves unnaturally. The sky was shifting. Kaelin spread his wings, feathers catching stray sparks of magic. "The balance wavers," he warned gravely. "By freeing these storms, you've awoken something else, something older than the mountain." Chessa swallowed hard, gazing into the distance where the torn edge of the heavens glimmered faintly. Somewhere out there, threads were unraveling faster than she could weave them. And she knew, deep down, that her journey had only just begun. The storm-heron's wings carried Chessa higher than she had ever dreamed possible. The earth had long vanished into a quilt of shadows below, and above, the heavens stretched wide, jeweled with countless stars that pulsed like living fire. But one stretch of the sky caught her breath completely, a dazzling arc of light unfurling before them, as though the stars themselves had spun a bridge across infinity. The bridge of falling stars. Every story Chessa had heard in childhood whispered of this place, a shimmering path where wishes took form, where mortals could walk upon starlight, though few ever returned unchanged. And now it lay before her, glimmering like threads from her own loom scattered across the night. The storm-heron landed softly upon the threshold, talons sparking silver against the glowing strands. This bridge, it rumbled, its voice echoing like thunder rolling across distant plains, is no ordinary crossing. Each step will test you. The stars will seek the truth of your heart. If you falter, they will fall, and the bridge will vanish beneath your feet. Chessa tightened her shawl around her shoulders, her hands trembling slightly. The memory of her valley, her people's fearful eyes, and her mother's whispered blessing gave her strength. "I won't falter," she said, though her voice was quieter than she wished. The heron tilted its head, as if weighing her courage, then lowered its wing. "Then step forward, Weaver of the Night." Chessa placed her foot onto the bridge. Instantly, the starlight beneath her rippled like water touched by a pebble. She gasped, afraid it would give way, but the light firmed again, holding her weight. Each thread pulsed under her, warm and alive, carrying whispers of ancient voices. She began to walk. At first, the journey felt wondrous. The stars glowed brighter around her, trailing silver dust as though they cheered her passage. She lifted her gaze, marveling at their brilliance. But then the whispers grew louder. Words, insistent, like the murmuring of 100 voices. "Who are you to walk here? What do you seek? Why should the heavens listen to you?" Chessa's heart beat faster. Each doubt clung to her chest like a stone. The starlight under her feet flickered, dimming at her hesitation. She stumbled, and one glowing thread fell away into darkness below, vanishing like a dying ember. "No," she cried, reaching toward the lost strand. But the heron's voice rang out from behind. "Do not cling to what is gone. The stars demand honesty. Speak your truth, Chessa, and the bridge will hold." Swallowing her fear, she pressed a hand over her heart. "I am Chessa of the valley," she declared, her voice echoing into the vastness. "I weave the night to guard my people's dreams. And though I am afraid, I walk this path because I must mend the sky. For if I don't, my home will be lost." The stars seemed to listen. Slowly, the bridge brightened again, strands weaving themselves anew beneath her feet. The voices softened, no longer accusing but curious, like children gathering around a storyteller's fire. Encouraged, Chessa pressed forward. But the bridge's trials were not done. Ahead, a figure began to form out of starlight, tall, robed, its face shifting like moonlight on water. Its eyes gleamed with galaxies, and when it spoke, the sound was like 1,000 winds. "To mend the sky, you must sacrifice. What will you give up, child of the valley?" The question struck her like a blade. Sacrifice. She thought of her loom, her shawl, the comforting embrace of her mother, the laughter of her friends as they once wove together under lantern light. She thought of the valley itself, its fields of grain swaying golden under the sun. Could she lose any of it? Her knees wavered. More threads of the bridge began to fall, slipping away into the void. The heron cried out sharply, "Answer, before all is lost." Tears pricked her eyes. I will give up my dreams," she whispered. "If the sky is made whole, if my people can sleep under stars unbroken, then my dreams can be woven into the night instead. Let them guide others, even if I can no longer follow them myself." The figure's eyes softened, galaxies dimming to gentle stars. It nodded once, and the broken strands of the bridge reformed, brighter than before. "Truth and sacrifice strengthen the weave," it intoned, before dissolving into light that rained down around her like blessings. Chessa stumbled onward, breathless but resolute. Step after step, the stars lifted her higher, until the far side of the bridge came into view, a silver archway carved of pure night, leading into a land where clouds glowed like lanterns and rivers of light flowed endlessly. The storm-heron landed beside her, its feathers glittering with stardust. "You did not fall," it said, a hint of pride rumbling in its voice. "You have begun to understand. The sky is not mended with thread alone, but with truth, sacrifice, and courage. Chessa wiped her tears, her heart steadier now. She gazed back at the bridge, where stars still fell gently, weaving themselves into trails of light across the heavens. For the first time since the tearing of the sky, she felt not only fear but hope. She turned to the archway. Beyond it, she knew, lay deeper trials, and perhaps the answers to how she might weave the torn heavens whole again. With the heron at her side, she stepped forward into the realm of starlit wonders. The heron's wings beat slow and steady as Chessa clung to its silvery feathers, her heart trembling between fear and wonder. The path ahead stretched across skies that seemed heavier than before, thick with the bruised colors of storms waiting to break. Yet just beyond those darkened folds, a shimmer glowed, a light too constant, too steady to belong to any star. "That is the mirror," the heron murmured, its voice like a wind moving through hollow reeds. "The sky mirror. It does not belong to the heavens, but to what the heavens hide." Chessa squinted. At first she thought she saw a calm, endless lake suspended in the air, reflecting the broken moonlight and scatter of faint stars. But as they drew nearer, the reflection deepened, widening until it seemed to ripple and breathe. The surface did not just mirror the world above, it echoed something beneath. The heron landed at the edge of the mirror, talons resting on nothing more than air. Chessa stepped down hesitantly, finding her feet pressing against invisible ground that hummed like a plucked string. "Why does it look alive?" Chessa whispered. "Because it is not only a mirror," the heron replied. "It remembers. And it reveals." Chessa knelt by the shining surface. Her reflection blinked back at her, but soon it shifted, changing as if stirred by unseen hands. Instead of her own face, she saw herself as a child, weaving grass threads into clumsy loops beside her grandmother. She laughed, a high, bright sound she had forgotten she once carried. Her heart swelled. "It shows the past," she murmured. The heron dipped its beak. "Yes, but the sky mirror does not stop there." The surface rippled again, and now Chessa saw herself older, standing taller, her loom stronger, weaving not grass nor yarn but threads of starlight itself. In her reflection, her hands moved swiftly, pulling strands of silver, gold, and shadow into patterns that pulsed with power. She gasped and stumbled back. That cannot be me." "It can," the heron said softly. "If you choose it. The mirror shows paths, possibilities, truths hidden within shadows." Her throat tightened. "But, what if I fail? What if the sky breaks before I can do anything?" The reflection shifted again. Now she saw not herself, but the valley she had left behind. The villagers stared up at the torn heavens. Some wept, some knelt in prayer, and some whispered her name, "Chessa, Chessa will return." Tears pricked her eyes. They were waiting, even now, believing. Then the reflection darkened. She saw the tear widening, spilling storm after storm until the valley lay in ruins, her people scattered like leaves before a flood. Her chest tightened. "No, I don't want to see this." "You must," the heron said, its wings lowering. "The mirror shows not what must be, but what could be. Shadows are possibilities too." The surface rippled once more, and for a moment she saw something stranger. A figure cloaked in silver fog, its face hidden, but in its hands gleamed a spindle, gleaming brighter than fire. The figure raised its head, as if aware it was being seen, and Chessa felt her breath catch. Who is that?" The heron tilted its head, uncertain. "One who walks between skies. Perhaps an ally, perhaps an enemy. The mirror gives answers, but never without riddles." Chessa clenched her fists. She could not turn away from what she had seen, even if it frightened her. "If the mirror shows me weaving light, then maybe that is what I must learn. Maybe that is how I mend the sky." The heron's eyes glowed faintly. "The threads are scattered, Chessa. In stars, in storms, in hidden places. The loom is within you, but the strands you must gather." Her reflection returned once more to her real self, a young girl, uncertain, trembling, yet with determination lighting her eyes. And for the first time, she did not flinch from it. She touched the mirror's surface. It was cool and smooth, but it pulsed with a strange rhythm, as if it had a heartbeat. The pulse traveled up her arm, into her chest, filling her with warmth. The mirror's voice, or perhaps only the echo of her own heart, whispered. Threads of fear can bind you. Threads of courage can free you. Choose carefully what you weave. The light shimmered, and then the mirror stilled, reflecting only the night sky above once more. Chessa rose slowly, her tears drying. I know what I must do, she said quietly. I will gather the threads. I will weave the sky whole again. I will not let fear be my pattern. The heron spread its wings, proud and steady. Then your journey continues. But know this, once the mirror has shown you, the heavens themselves will begin to test you. They will ask whether your hands are steady enough to hold what you have seen. Chessa took a deep breath. Her reflection still glowed in her mind, the weaver of starlight, the girl she could become. She did not know if she was ready, but she knew she would not turn back. Let the heavens test me, she said. I will weave my answer. The heron lifted her once more, and they soared away from the sky mirror, leaving its rippling truths behind. But its words, and its visions, wove themselves into her heart like threads she would carry forever. The cavern of the storm loom was unlike any place Chessa had ever seen. The walls were formed from clouds solidified into shimmering crystal, glowing faintly with threads of lightning that pulsed as though the cavern itself were alive. Suspended in the center was the loom, a colossal construct of silver beams and starlight threads, its frame turning slowly in the air as if guided by invisible hands. Every thread hummed with a low, musical note, and together they wove a sound so vast and deep that Chessa felt it in her bones. This, said the storm-heron in a voice that trembled like thunder far away, is the heart of the skies. The loom weaves storms, winds, and rains, keeping balance between sea and sky. But it is faltering, for its song has grown weak. Chessa approached, her steps careful on the glass-like floor. She touched one of the nearest threads, and it thrummed in response, a vibration of sorrow that filled her chest with both awe and grief. She remembered the tear in the heavens, the chaos that had swept her valley, and knew that this loom was at the center of it all. Can it be mended? She asked softly. The storm-heron dipped its great head. Yes, but it cannot be mended by storm alone. It requires the voice of one who understands both silence and song. That is why you were brought here, Chessa. Her hands trembled. Me, I only wove blankets in a small valley. How could I fix something so enormous? Because you wove the night when the world had none, said a new voice, deep, resonant, carrying an echo of rain on stone. Chessa turned to see a figure stepping from the shadows of the cavern. He was tall, cloaked in flowing robes made of storm clouds, his face hidden beneath a hood of lightning. His presence made the air quiver. Who are you? She whispered. I am the keeper of the storm loom, he said. Long have I guarded it, but my voice has grown thin, my strength waning. A new singer must rise to weave where I falter. He extended a hand toward her. Your threads are not of storm, but of life and memory. That is what the loom needs. Chessa hesitated, but when she placed her hand in his, warmth spread through her veins like sunrise after rain. He guided her toward the loom, where threads of lightning awaited her touch. Close your eyes, the keeper murmured. Do not weave with fear. Sing with what you carry inside. Chessa took a breath. She remembered her valley, the laughter of children running in the fields, the steady hum of her mother's spinning wheel, the way her loom had always sung to her when the nights grew long. She let those memories fill her chest until her voice broke free in a trembling song. The cavern answered. The threads around her quivered, their tones shifting, harmonizing with her melody. She sang of her people, of the stars that guided travelers, of the wind that whispered secrets to trees. Every note pulled a torn thread into place, stitching light back into the loom. The storm-heron spread its wings, adding its deep call to her song, and the keeper lifted his hands, weaving thunder into her melody. The cavern filled with sound, storm and silence, sorrow and hope, lightning and lullaby, until Chessa felt as though the very fabric of the sky was singing through her. But the task was not easy. For every thread she mended, another frayed, as if testing her resolve. Her voice faltered when she thought of her valley in danger, but then she remembered the faces of the villagers, the children who had clung to her hands, the elders who had told her stories by firelight. She realized that this was not only her burden, it was her gift. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice grew stronger. Slowly, the threads began to glow with steady light, weaving into patterns of stars and rain clouds. The cavern brightened, the hum of the loom deepening into a steady rhythm once more. At last, the keeper raised his hand. The loom shone as brightly as the first dawn. "It is mended, for now," he said. "But the balance is fragile. The storm is not yet over. The true test awaits beyond this cavern." Chessa lowered her hands, her body trembling from the effort. "I will do whatever it takes," she whispered. The keeper nodded, his hood of lightning flickering softly. "Then carry the song of the loom in your heart, for it will guide you when shadows rise." The storm-heron bent its great neck, letting her climb once more onto its back. As they prepared to leave, the cavern echoed with the fading tones of her song, the melody she had woven into the fabric of the sky itself. When she looked back one last time, the loom shone steady and strong, but she knew the journey ahead would demand more than song alone. And with that, the heron carried her into the storm once more. The storm carried Chessa and the heron higher than ever before. The wind screamed like a chorus of lost voices, tugging at her hair and her cloak. Above them, the heavens stretched vast and bruised with shadow. Yet in the farthest reaches of the sky, she saw it, the place where the fabric of the firmament had torn completely. The horizon itself no longer looked whole. It flickered and cracked, jagged edges glowing like splintered glass. Through the fissures she glimpsed emptiness, an endless void without stars, without clouds, without life. The broken horizon bled darkness into the world, pulling the winds toward its heart like a great whirlpool. "This is it," the heron croaked, its voice hoarse, wings straining against the gales. "The wound where sky and storm divide. The place the loom must be woven anew, or all will unravel." Chessa tightened her grip on her satchel, feeling the threads of light within it thrumming, almost alive. They were eager now, as if they too understood the urgency. Her heart pounded, and for the first time, fear made her tremble. What if her hands failed her? What if her weaving could not bind something so immense? "Courage, little weaver," whispered a memory, her grandmother's voice, carried in the wind. "Threads follow the will of the heart." The heron landed on a jagged piece of broken cloud that jutted over the abyss. Chessa stepped down, the ground beneath her feet unstable, like shards of frozen mist. She walked forward, her eyes fixed on the torn horizon. It was terrible and beautiful at once. Vast strands of darkness frayed into nothingness, whipping around like wild serpents. Stars dangled like beads from broken cords, flickering faintly as if begging not to vanish. Every breath she took seemed to echo against eternity. At the edge, a figure emerged, shaped from shadow, but glimmering faintly, as if made from fragments of shattered night. Its eyes glowed white, and its voice rolled like thunder. "You are the one who would mend this wound?" it asked. Chessa swallowed her fear and nodded. "Yes, my hands were given to weave. My heart was given to hold. I will not let the sky fall." The figure tilted its head. "Weavers before you tried and failed. They bound their fear into the threads, and the fabric tore again. What makes you believe you are different?" Chessa thought of her valley, her people, the children who looked at the stars and dreamed. She thought of the heron's faith, the mirror's reflection of her true self, and the songs that had strengthened her along the way. Her voice trembled, but it carried. "Because I do not weave alone. Every step of my journey has placed another thread within me: hope, courage, truth, song. And together, they are stronger than fear." For a long moment, silence. Then the shadow being raised an arm and pointed toward the torn horizon. "Then show me. Bind what has been broken. Weave where even time has frayed." Chessa drew out her storm loom. The frame vibrated as if recognizing its true test. One by one, she laid the glowing threads across it, silver from the stars, blue from the heron's wings, gold from her own heart. As she began to weave, the air shifted. The wind paused, listening. Her fingers moved with rhythm born from love and memory. Each thread hummed as it intertwined, forming patterns that glowed brighter than lightning. She sang softly, her voice carrying the song of every soul who had touched her path. But as she wove, the horizon roared. The void pulled harder, trying to devour her loom, her threads, her very breath. Cracks widened, spilling torrents of darkness. The ground beneath her feet crumbled. The heron cried out, Hold fast, Chessa. Do not let go. Sweat beaded on her brow, her arms aching as the loom grew heavy with power. The shadow figure loomed closer, its voice both warning and challenge. If you falter now, all falls with you. Her heart raced, her hands shook, the threads tangled. For a moment, despair coiled in her chest. But then she remembered the mirror's reflection, showing her not just her flaws, but her light. She closed her eyes and whispered, I am the girl who wove the night. I am Chessa, and I do not break. Her fingers steadied, the song in her throat rose stronger, clear as dawn. She wove faster, tighter, her threads crossing the void, binding star to star, horizon to horizon. Slowly, the cracks began to mend. The darkness hissed and retreated, stitched shut by the brilliance of her weaving. The figure of shadow stepped back, its glowing eyes softening. You may yet succeed. At last, with one final golden thread, Chessa tied the last knot. The loom sang with light, a burst of radiance brighter than any storm. The shattered horizon began to heal, its edges smoothing, its stars reigniting. But the effort cost her dearly. She collapsed to her knees, trembling, her breath ragged. The heron shielded her with its wings as the sky calmed. The figure of shadow dissolved, its voice a whisper carried on the winds. One last thread remains, Weaver. One final trial. Chessa lifted her weary head. Beyond the mended horizon, she saw something new, a gate of light, shimmering like a doorway between worlds. And beyond it, the final task awaited. She clutched the loom to her chest and whispered to herself, I've come this far. I will see it through. The heron nudged her gently, ready to fly once more. Together, they turned toward the gate. The horizon, though mended, still trembled faintly, waiting for the last weaving to be done. The night had broken. The sky, once whole and endless, now lay in jagged pieces scattered across the horizon. Chessa stood at the highest peak of the storm-touched mountains, her storm loom trembling under her hands. Her heart was weary from all she had seen, the falling stars, the mirror of the sky, the endless cries of the storm. Yet she knew this was the moment her whole life had led her toward. Behind her, the storm-heron let out a long, trembling cry, its feathers glowing faintly as if it too carried the last fragments of the night sky within its wings. This is the end of the storm, it whispered, its voice like a sigh carried through the wind. But only you can decide if it will end in darkness, or in dawn. Chessa swallowed hard. Before her, the shattered horizon stretched like a wound. Huge cracks bled fire and shadow, spilling chaos into the air. Lightning forked in unnatural colors, rivers of clouds spiraled without end, and stars fell like shattered glass around her. It was terrible, but within its ruin, Chessa glimpsed possibility. She set the loom upon the mountain's crest. Her fingers trembled. Every lesson, every memory of the valley and her people came flooding back. Her grandmother's steady hands teaching her the loom, the way villagers looked to her for comfort, the promise she had whispered when she left, I will return. I will bring the sky back whole. But now, as the storm roared louder, she realized she could not simply weave the sky back as it had been. Something inside her whispered, the world has changed. And so must the loom. The loom awakens. Chessa reached into her pouch and drew out the threads she had gathered on her journey. The silver strand gifted by the heron. The golden thread from the bridge of falling stars. The mirrored thread she had taken from the lake of sky reflections. The song thread, spun from the hymn of the storm itself. Each glowed faintly, alive, humming with the voices of all she had encountered. Her hands guided them across the loom, but as she began to weave, she noticed the loom itself changing. No longer was it only of wood and wire, now it seemed made of stormlight, its frame glowing with dawn fire, its strings humming like living wind. With every stroke of her shuttle, the world shifted. A torn fragment of sky fused with another. A broken star mended into brilliance again. Each weave stitched not only the heavens, but also the bonds between all who had stood with her, the villagers who waited in hope, the guardians of storm who had guided her, the memory of her grandmother, who still lingered in her heart. And slowly, the storm began to quiet. The final test. But as she reached the heart of the shattered horizon, something stirred. Out of the broken sky rose a figure cloaked in storm fire, tall, formless, and shifting, with eyes like endless thunder. I am the tempest unbound, it thundered, voice shaking the mountain beneath her feet. I am the storm that will not be tamed. You think your loom can bind me. You are but a girl, fragile as a thread yourself. Chessa's heart pounded. She wanted to step back, to run, but instead she stood tall. I don't weave to bind you, she said softly, though her voice carried strong. I weave to remind the sky what it means to hold both storm and stillness. To remind the world that dawn is born not from defeating the night, but from walking through it. The storm roared, flinging wind and lightning at her loom. The heron cried out, shielding her with its wings, but Chessa's hands kept moving. Even as her fingers bled from the cutting threads, even as her body shook, she wove faster. The threads of silver, gold, and mirrored light came together into a tapestry more beautiful than any sky had ever known. Not just night, not just storm, but the wholeness of both, stars shining with the memory of rain, clouds glimmering with dawn fire, rivers of light flowing into rivers of shadow, united. The tempest shrieked, its form unraveling as it was drawn into the weave. Its fury became lightning that lit the tapestry's edge. Its cry became thunder that deepened the sky's voice. Even its chaos became pattern, drawn into something greater. At last, with one final stroke of the shuttle, Chessa bound the last broken seam. The first dawn. Silence. Then, light. The mountain peak glowed as the first rays of dawn spilled across the horizon. The shattered sky was whole again, but not the same. Now it shone brighter, deeper, richer than before, as if every storm and every star had woven together to birth a sky that would never again be afraid of breaking. The storm-heron let out a cry of joy, its body dissolving into a scatter of golden feathers that became part of the dawn. You have done it, Weaver, its voice whispered as it faded into the light. Chessa fell to her knees, her tears glimmering as bright as stars. She had carried the storm in her hands, and now she had given it back as morning. As she descended from the mountain, the people of the valley were already waiting. Their eyes lifted to the new sky, their faces shining with wonder. When they saw her approach, carrying the storm loom now glowing faintly with the memory of her journey, they knelt in gratitude. But Chessa only shook her head, smiling softly. Do not kneel. The sky is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us, to every voice, every song, every heart that endures the storm. And so the people rose, their spirits lifted, their faith in dawn forever renewed. The Weaver's legacy. Years later, the valley would tell the tale of Chessa, the girl who wove the storm into dawn. Her loom was placed in the village square, no longer as a tool, but as a reminder, that even the fiercest storms can be woven into something beautiful, if only one has the courage to keep weaving. And whenever a new storm rose on the horizon, the villagers would not tremble in fear, but lift their eyes to the sky with trust, whispering, "The dawn will come." For the Weaver of Stormclouds walks with us still. Glowing star moral lesson. The Weaver of Stormclouds teaches us that even the smallest hands can mend the greatest rifts. Courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to step forward despite it. Creativity, patience, and resilience can heal wounds that storms leave behind. Just like Chessa, we all hold a loom within us, the power to weave light from darkness, to stitch brokenness into beauty, and to remind the world that dawn always follows night. For more motivation stories, please like, share and subscribe this channel. Thanks and God bless.